Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are here today to talk about having a voice in the face of secrecy, silence, and shame. And all of us have an experience of that with having been through the Sedona Sweat Lodge, and which was actually a spiritual retreat where the last day was a sweat lodge was the exercise, and three of our friends died and 20 of us were sent to the hospital. It was a traumatic experience for all of us, but then it also got exploded when the national media picked it up, and it seemed to just continue to spiral. And so it was a great opportunity for all of us to definitely grow and expand as human beings, because there were lots of challenges around that, specifically around the area of secrecy, silence, and shame. And so about a year ago, CNN Films approached us to be a part of a upcoming feature-length documentary, and amazingly, it got accepted into Tribeca Film Festival, which will be premiering at next week. It's this week.
Friday.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. April 15th on Friday, we will be at the premiere of that. And so I'm Brandy Amstel, and what I do is I produce transformational experiences for people through art, film, and events, really helping people to live powerfully in their lives. And so, Julie, will you please introduce yourself to give people a context for who you are?
Sure. I am a piano teacher. I've been teaching piano for 23 years, and I also have a psychic business, and I do both. Mostly just I help in the self-development world, but I tend to do it much more low key. I definitely approach my practice as a teacher.
Awesome. And how about you, Laura? Just go ahead and give people a little glimpse of who you are.
Sure. Well, my name is Laura Tucker. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My business is, I am a business coach, and I help entrepreneurs and business leaders grow their business and themselves. And also, as a result of everything that we've been through, I've made the focus of my coaching, or the passion of my coaching, helping entrepreneurs and leaders who have had a significant challenge or traumatic event or crisis in their life manage their business and move forward in the face of all of that.
Yeah. So, when all of this happened, there was this moment for myself for sure. Like the incident happened and the media started running with it, and I got settled back home, and it was kind of like people asking me questions, and I didn't really know how to manage that in the very beginning for sure. So there was definitely a lot of silence and secrecy. But specifically right now, I want to talk about secrecy and how none of us really wanted to necessarily open up to what was going on for the event. So what I want to talk about here for the first few minutes is really, how did being in the Sedona Sweat Lodge impact you with secrecy? And then how also with the film upcoming, this whole thing of secrecy around that and what has shown up for you. Julie, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm a very private person for the most part. I am open, and yet I tend not to put my life on display unless I find that there's a story that will illustrate a point. So to go to Sedona and the Sweat Lodge, it was a very personal decision, and it was something that I did for myself. And I told a few people so they knew where I was, but it wasn't anything that I felt like I needed to declare to the world. And once people died, and there were news cameras everywhere, and the world became interested in our story, it was a very different look at this event, where it had never meant to be public. It was something that was supposed to be ours and that we would take it with us, and the personal transformations would help us in our day-to-day lives thereafter. And the movie, I suppose, is a way for me personally to share my point of view. That's all I can share. I don't know what happened to other people other than from hearing their stories. And I still feel quite confused as to so much of what happened, because I feel like I was in such a haze for so much of it that I still would like to talk to people who were there. And the movie allowed me to at least speak my part and to share with the world what I thought happened and my perspective. And I am only one voice out of the 53 people who were there. And I hope that it gives a little bit more insight, definitely more than talking to people who weren't at that event. So at least it's firsthand perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, how about yourself? How has Secrecy shown up for you around the Sweat Lodge and around the film?
Well, in the beginning, a lot of people knew that almost everyone in my life knew that I was headed off to Sedona for another personal development event. And that's what we used to refer them to as. And so when they knew I was there, they didn't necessarily know intimate details about what I was doing, but they had also experienced the rapid growth and I would go so far to say as a transformation in the months and year plus that I had been going to all of these events with James Arthur Ray. So I was getting a ton of value from it. I was very open about what I was doing. And, so this was the final event. After things went so horribly wrong, it was extremely difficult for me to, go back into my world and, digest what was going on, even from the fact of what happened. There's just so many variables, so many different opinions being expressed. I was just like anyone else. Most of my information was coming to me over the media, and then through isolated conversations. But the community around our personal growth became very polarized, and I found that I couldn't continue the conversations at either end of the spectrum. So I made a conscious decision that I needed to be quiet. And it was very much against my nature, but it was also something that I needed to do in order to withdraw and process, and then anticipating eventually that there was going to be a trial and having to testify. So that really, it helped me and it hurt me. It helped me in the sense that every time I did speak about it, I was re-experiencing the emotions, the trauma of the day, of the aftermath. But it also hurt me because it became my habit to not speak and to shut down around it. And until last year when I was approached to participate in the film myself.
Yeah, and I think I have a little bit different story than you guys, in that, yes, I wanted to be silent and I wanted to process and figure it out. Like I was unclear really about how we had gotten where we were. Like we were in this transformational weekend or week, I guess it was a week-long 5-day retreat. And how did we go from there to being on national television and people talking and saying some really horrible things in the media about us? And they didn't know anything about us or about the event or the journey or the path that we were on or why we were doing it or any of that. And so all of a sudden there was so many judgments and assessments coming from all different directions. And it was a little overwhelming. But in the moment, I kind of felt like this deep sadness and just like intense responsibility that I was still alive and that I had to be the one that spoke up for those that were unwilling and who couldn't. And it was mostly for the people that died because there were so many horrible things being said and judgments about that. And so it was like, oh my gosh, I have to be the one because I'm willing. Like I don't even really feel like I have a choice here. Like I have to do this. It was such a calling. And once I did, I had no idea really what I was getting myself into. It was just like this deep desire to make a difference for those families and for all of my friends that were there with me, that we had just all shrinked away and like, pulled back. And yeah, so then doing an interview on 2020, which I had hoped would be an opportunity to really speak a truth from somebody that was actually in there and could shed some light on the whole thing. And it just didn't work out that way. Like my being willing to share actually turned into something very different than what I had actually said or intended. And it was very, very hurtful. And so immediately I shrunk away even more. So after seeing that, it was just like, whoa, okay. Now people even have a worse opinion or thought about me. Mm-hmm. And so I really shrunk away. You know, I would play safely in my little community, but like, it was like, ooh, and even within my community, there was so much that was not said. Like it wasn't allowed to bring this up in business settings. Like this was like a woo-woo thing. And it was like, whoa. So in the business world, it was completely silent. Like pretend that didn't happen. And so there was a lot of silence that came around it. And so now being a part of this film, it really was another opportunity. Like I'm clear, right, that, you know, the universe presents us opportunities to grow and expand and to demonstrate our level of mastery. It's like this is part of my life curriculum is where is it that I'm autopilot or where am I giving my power away? Like that's been my curriculum. And so like definitely being a part of the film is another opportunity for me to speak my truth again and have it be a different way. So that's my intention with being a part of this film. And none of us has seen it yet, so there's a lot of anticipation for sure. And so I kind of want to talk about, you know, we talked about the secrecy and I don't know if you guys want to say a little bit more about the silence around all of it and really talk about, well, I think specifically what I'm interested in hearing is your takes on the silence. Like we were given an idea, the filmmakers presented us with this idea that they had and the story that they wanted to be able to tell. And can you talk a little bit more about the silence that still exists, right? Like I think we've drawn a picture for people that there was secrecy and silence around a traumatic event. Almost everyone that goes through that experiences the secrecy and the silence a little bit, so they can totally relate to that. But what I want to kind of open up now is the secrecy and the silence that's still happening.
Well, I feel like even in the industry that there are people really ran away, far, far away from this topic and from James, where they didn't want to be associated with him. They didn't want his story to pull them down. And I know the three of us have discussed that they missed an opportunity. They could have really stepped up and helped where there was this deficit in the self-help industry, where we wanted a leader, we wanted some wisdom, we wanted just somebody to make sense of it all. And the silence in the industry, I thought, was deafening, where no one was willing to risk their careers in order to say what they believed. And you know, not to point fingers and say that they were wrong in doing so, because we experienced and witnessed how cruel reactions and unconsciousness can be. And especially when the media decides to slant a story just so they can get more viewers. So I would hope that this movie provides an opportunity for the conversation to come up again. I think enough time has passed, and people have had their own experiences and time to digest it and hopefully really kind of come to terms with what they think. And I don't think that there are any hard and fast right or wrong in any of this. I think everything is so gray. And so I would like there just to be an intelligent conversation. I would like there to be some kind of dialogue.
How about you, Laura?
Well, I agree with absolutely everything that Julie just said about the way that the leaders in the self-help industry, most of whom had an opportunity to have a voice at that time, chose silence. And yes, they stepped away from James Arthur Ray, which I can understand wanting to do that, to want to dissociate themselves and the way they do business from the outcome of 3 people dying in a sweat lodge at a self-help or spiritual event. But that's all well and good. But one thing that struck me and still strikes me is that they missed an opportunity to advocate for everyone who attends the self-help industry events. Their silence created a vacuum, and that vacuum was filled with anger and vitriol and judgment. And I think it was much easier for them and everybody else who wants to see it in terms of black and white to let the world or the interested observers believe that this was a bunch of wackos out in the middle of the desert doing something that is right off the spectrum, when in fact, this kind of thing happens very frequently. I would even go so far as to say all the time, probably every weekend. But I think that they saw it as too risky. I think they saw it as something it rocked the industry. I know it did. I think a lot of people ran their businesses differently, at least for a time. I think people might have, I talked to a number of people that I was in touch with at the time who go to events and who hold events themselves, and they were stunned, but they were stunned into silence. And it shows, there's still a vacuum there. And my understanding is that many of them were contacted to be a part of the film because the producer and director wanted to have a bigger conversation about the industry themselves, and that some spoke off the record, but nobody was interested in being a part of the film. So even that today says something. And I think that's a conversation worth having, because I think that there's probably, it's an unregulated, massive industry. And who's keeping the leaders in check? I don't think that I pray it's an isolated incident, but we've already had other instances since then where people are harmed or seriously at self-help events. I think it's worth shining a light on, and I would be thrilled if the film helped to do that in some way.
Yeah, I think for myself, it was mostly, being appalled, like both of you were really about that nobody wanted to step up. Like all of these people that we considered in this particular time frame, right, of life, that were authorities or world thought leaders was a word that a lot gets thrown around a lot. And it's like, here are these people that we're all looking up to, aspiring that we could also be world thought leaders. But yet when it really gets down to the nitty gritty and some deep, serious conversations, none of them are really willing to step up and have that conversation. And so for me, it's still just like, wow, really? Really, like, here's a really awesome platform for them to be able to like engage in this conversation and for us to really figure out like what is the next step for humanity, right? Like, how do we wake people up and raise the consciousness of the planet if we're not even willing to use this type of a platform to engage in that conversation? It's more like these little individual places where, oh, I'll talk to my group or my clan and this is what I believe. But I think it's really about looking at a more of a global perspective on personal development. Everywhere I go, people talk about being on a spiritual path. Very different than it was 10 years ago, right? Like, everybody wasn't having that conversation, but now it's like pretty mainstream in my world, and I don't have that special of a world, although they like to think that. But it's like, I mean, it's in the collective consciousness, and the conversations are being had, and it's in places that it typically wasn't a few years back. And so I'm just kind of sad that the conversation that they didn't join in and choose to really take this time right now to make a big impact. And so there was something else you said, Laura, that really struck me. I want to get back to it. Who knows? Maybe it'll come up in a minute. But I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the judgment. So, I know what it was. It was like, I actually was determined that I was not going to let this incident impact me and my personal growth, right? So I just like delved back in. That was the way that I dealt with trauma. Not to say that was right or even easy. Just saying. But it is the path that I chose. And in going to going to different leaders to see what the difference was and how could I heal from this, and that I experienced so much judgment. Initially, it was, each one of the leaders doing their thing, right? Like their whatever it is that they do, their little special brand. And then when they would find out, like there's one in particular that I'm going to say, I'm not going to say who it was, but I will say I went to one and they wanted me to participate in a breaking of the board, like to demonstrate that, my limiting belief and being able to break through it, right? Like so many people have done that now, even on, just business retreats, they do the breaking of the board. It doesn't even have to have the word spiritual retreat in it anymore. But anyway, I was like, nah, you know what? I'm not going to do that. And they started to like give me a hard time about not wanting to do it and what's stopping me and all this. I'm like, I broke so many boards. I'm really clear. I can break boards and I can break through that limiting belief. Like, I'm done with that one. Anyway, and they kept pressing and kept pressing. And I was like, I think maybe, you probably want to realize that let people know. Oh, that was the other thing, was they didn't let people know that it was possible that they could break their hand. And I felt like, isn't that interesting? And I made that as one of the comments. I was like, I'm not willing to potentially break my hand for a board that I've already done that exercise. And it was like really like they just shucked it. Oh my gosh, the brakes came on, big steaming brakes, right? Because that was really scary. And I'm thinking like, okay, so here, like obviously this incident touched a nerve on how things are done in the industry. And it's like, why can't we talk about it and really, blow it up? Well, let's really expand on it. And what is the way to enlightenment or personal development? What's the way to breaking through limiting beliefs? And I know we've talked about it on previous blabs, which are all available for replay, by the way. So check them out if you haven't had a chance. But, we talked about that, this whole idea that, I don't know. I'm like, I think that you guys get the point. It's like there is this whole idea that, I don't know, I lost it. You guys help me out here. What we were talking about.
I think you're going to manufactured challenges.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. I was like,
totally.
We had a word for this.
Address that here.
Yeah. And so it was really great that we had that conversation. So I kind of want to switch it up to the judgments and talk a little bit more about some of the judgments that you experience, because I think that kind of goes into this whole talk about shame. And shame was one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about after Laura, you brought it up, and I'm like, I don't have shame. What are you talking about? I don't have that. And then she's like, sends me some excerpts from Brene Brown's book, and I don't remember the title. So Laura, if you have that, please let me know.
Sure. Well, I'll just say it right now. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection, where one of the books that I sent a page from, and the other is called Daring Greatly. And I knew when I sent it, I didn't even highlight that sentence, but it's quote unquote, either admit that you experience shame or admit that you're a sociopath. So which one would you rather admit to?
So immediately I'm like, oh my gosh, what? So I started looking at what is shame and delving into it. And so I started looking at judgments and shames. And so I'd like for both of you to talk about any of the shame or judgments that you see around having been in the sweat lodge that was put on by either you or the people in your community. And then also maybe if we could talk a little bit about the judgment or the fear of judgment or shame with the upcoming premiere, if there is anything. Yeah. Whoever wants to go first on this one, I just toss it out there.
Julie, you go ahead. I'm tweeting.
Okay. Well, the judgment and shame, it's interesting because I value my privacy. So what I tend to do is not disclose that much about my life. And I find that it's more convenient than anything else. And where shame comes in is that I found myself even unwilling to talk to my closest friends, because then it was much more of who am I? Who do I think I am? If I was a person who attended an event where the person who led the whole event led people to their deaths, I felt like that said something about me. And I associated, when I read all of the reports in the media about us, the people who attended, I thought, yeah, I can see why they may think that. I can see where they might have, that crossed their mind, because I also thought that about me at one point, because again, who am I that I chose to follow this man where this is the end result, where it was so chaotic and so how just unimaginable. And yet it's what we all lived through. So in doing the movie and agreeing to do the documentary and talking about this once again, I absolutely am encountering feelings of shame all over again. And it's just, there's a reluctance, and it's almost like I get a defensive posture. I'm ready for the battle before the battle has even begun. Right? Like I'm mentally preparing for every single possible scenario, even though it's not even really running through my head. I just know what happened before. And I know that nobody was prepared for any of that backlash from before, and how everybody was so vulnerable. That was like at our weakest points in our lives. And that's when the criticism was its harshest. And so there's a lot of emotions on top of the shame that come, and just trying to stay authentic and stay true to my own voice, and to remember to come from a place of love and to recognize that we are all human. We are all in this together. And if I'm ashamed of something that I have done, I am sure that somebody else who is human like me has done it before me. And somebody will do it after me. And so we all can say, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, me too. I did that too. Yeah, I'm not proud of that either. And what can we do about it? What do you want to do now? So I don't want to be ashamed about shame. I want that also to just to be an emotion that we have. It's a feedback mechanism. And so if we feel it, then something's off in our lives, and it's an opportunity for us to take a look at it and change it.
Mm-hmm. Just so
what are your thoughts, Laura?
Yeah. Yeah, shame has been just going back to that book, because I've had so much help from Brene Brown and her work and her writing, and the idea of shame needing three things to run out of control in our lives, and they are secrecy, silence, and judgment. That's where we pulled the title of our blab from. And when I examined it right after the event, I went nuts getting help. Not nuts, but I did every possible avenue of treatment, therapy, support, counseling, body work, you name it. Like when you're in that close to people who died tragically and could have died yourself, or even more so, a part of my shame was around surviving. Mm-hmm. And then having to, deal with that survivor's guilt or shame, and on top of the onslaught, the public onslaught, and then the resounding silence of not just the industry like we were talking about earlier, but also silence amongst family, friends, and associates. Not all of them, especially, my goodness, if anyone's on here who, was with me during those times, don't think it was necessarily you. But it was such a big thing, for a big nugget for people to digest. And it was really difficult. They didn't know how to talk to me about it. I didn't know how to talk to them about it. And how do you share those dark, dark, dark emotions? I don't know that I had the words for them. And then I just got busy on with life, not realizing until very recently, within the last year, that as I got on with life and all of the things that I've done in the last 6.5 years, which includes, being married, being a stepmother, being a business owner, starting a bricks and mortar business from, ground zero, growing it, selling it, every single thing that I did, even though I'm always full on, I'm always doing, but I was carrying these horrible emotions with me, and they weren't that far below the surface. And, I come to realize lately that when you've gone through something horrible like that, like I did, or like we did, and you're carrying that literal baggage or emotional baggage, it shows up in all of your results, and it showed up in all of my results. And so it hasn't been until the last year and it really started with the interview for the movie that I haven't seen and you haven't seen, or will be seeing on Friday. It started with giving voice to the experience. And if I've learned anything from that, because nobody judged me more harshly than I judged myself. I still struggle with that. Whether it be missed opportunities, you name it. When you go into a sweat lodge with 50 other people, the person beside me passed away. It was horrible. And, on the scale of horrible, it was less horrible for me than people who lost a loved one. But I carried that, and it was only within this last year that I've started to put it down. And so as much as I am really nervous about Friday night. I mean, think about it. We're meeting in New York City to go and see a film premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival that we're in.
I
right?
haven't seen it yet.
And it sold out in 19 minutes.
Yeah, that sold out in 9. Yeah, it was so like, yeah. And, you know, sorry, Julie, but it's, what I really am starting to really love about it, and we talked about this privately, is that it all played out on the published stage that gave it extra amperage. Everything that was horrible or felt bad felt worse for me because of it. And now this this interview, this movie, whatever it's going to be, you know, hopefully it's not a huge disappointment, but we know if it made it in to do a world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival, it has to be compelling at minimum. So it's all playing out on a public stage again. And for some reason, it brings me back to one of those things where you deal with the problem on the level that it occurs. You know, if you're experiencing stress and anxiety, you seek solutions for stress and anxiety. And there's everything from holistic all the way to traditional. If you have cancer, you get medical treatment. You have a public shaming across the internet and across network television. Well, this is an opportunity to deal with it and see some form of resolution, or hopefully something purposeful and meaningful come out of such a horrific experience and a horrendous and tremendous loss. So, and when I focus on that and I think about going to New York and going to, you know, seeing you, going to the movie, no matter who's there, what happens, my nervousness starts to evaporate and it becomes excitement and looking forward to the possibility of, you know, of what our willingness to be, or my willingness, or not if you agree, but being that vulnerable all over again.
Yeah.
This time with a choice, you know, at this time with a say. And so I'm really, that part of me can't wait to see not just the film, but how people receive the film, what the response is. And you know, I'm expecting both ends of the spectrum, but what I'm looking for, just to put it out there, is I'm hoping that people will see the film, see the story, understand that, you know, this wasn't what they said it was on TV and on the internet, and be able to put themselves in our shoes. And many people can, especially people who are actively into personal growth and spiritual development. They have a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy. And those are the people that I focus 100% of my energy on. But that's what I'm hoping for the film, is that it does literally shed light. And it's called Enlighten Us, the Rise and Fall of James Arthur Ray, that it sheds light on something that has been kept out of the spotlight because it was marginalized.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe, I feel the same way that you do. And so much of what you said, both of you, it's like, I am excited to see the film, but that it's taken me a moment. There's been moments of panic and just freak out, like, oh my gosh, how could I possibly put myself in this situation again where a filmmaker or the editor can, you know, mix my words up and have it be what they want it to be to sell tickets, you know, to the theater. It's like, why am I doing this? And then it's like, I get present to my bigger commitment, my bigger why, and like really wanting to make a difference, wanting to have my voice heard, to heal myself, to continue that path of healing, but then to also open that up to others. Because I really feel like what one person can do, everybody can do. So by me doing this work, by you doing this work, by us collectively doing this work, then it makes it possible for so many others. And I'm so grateful for both of you and your willingness to participate in this film, because I know how uncomfortable it made both of you to be a part of it. But I knew that if you were going to be with me, that we could tell a story that at least started to make sense for people. Like it was our personal truths, and I kind of had an idea like already how you felt, and I'm like, this, if you could share that, then people could really start to get a glimpse. It wouldn't be just like these bunch of disjointed stories that kind of got pulled out in moments of trauma, and then people try to patch together a story in their head about what it was. But now it was more like, okay, there's been some healing. We've had some time to actually process what happened to us. And now it's time for us to be able to, kind of demonstrate on a bigger level what went in. Why did we do it? Why did we do Spiritual Warrior? What did we hope to gain from it? Why do we choose a path of enlightenment, or a path of exploring personal development, however you want to put that? But so I'm excited that you guys are a part of it. I am grateful. I hope you hear that. And then with that said, for me, there's just been so much shame and so much judgment. And once it got named and claimed, like, oh, that's really shame, girl. That's what that is. It was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I have had a lot of shame. I'd never labeled it that way, so it didn't show up that way. But there's been a lot of power in like really naming it. Oh yeah, that's where I'm shaming. And that's what's going on there. And so once you do recognize it and acknowledge it as something that you're judging yourself, I'm like the queen of judgment to myself. And just like you said, Laura, the biggest judgment that came around all of what happened was for myself. I judged myself so harshly that how could I have possibly ended up there in that incident? Like, what did I do in my life that had me show up there? And there was a lot of judgment that was bad. Now I'm kind of at a place where I'm like, yeah, of course I was there, because I have a bigger game to play in this world. And there was nothing going to catalyze me forward unless I had some type of event like this happen in my life. Otherwise, life was pretty awesome the way it was. And there was nothing to shake it up or inspire, or yes, I don't know if it's inspire me, but like spark me. That's about a better word. Spark me to some serious personal growth, right? Mm-hmm. It was just little small incremental stuff. And little did I realize that going to this Spiritual Warrior event, I definitely went there to, I think the promise was to uncover some black bags, which is what it was called in the description, uncovering those black bags that are buried in your subconscious that keep us from achieving that next level of success. And I'm like, whoa, I'm all over that. Like, I know there's some baggage in here that I'm just not addressing. Little did I realize that the lessons that I learned had nothing really to do with those black bags in my subconscious, because it was so much bigger. And it was happened afterwards, and all of the subconscious stuff that was going on around my participation, whether to speak up, and then, oh my gosh, the judgment about what was said, and like, oh my God, that's not a clear representation of who I am or why I'm there, and the hurt and the pain and the shame that now I'm known as the girl that, weekend warrior to, I don't know, it was like something really dramatic and not representational of my experience there. So now I'm excited that I have some acknowledgement of shame, of the judgment and all of the judgment that have gone on, and can start to at least, I won't say like bury it or get rid of it, because I think that shame is something that, I think you mentioned to it, Julie, it's something that, it's an emotion that we experience. And it's not like we're never going to experience shame or judgment in our life. It's more about being aware and acknowledging, oh, yeah, there's that shame thing that I'm doing. That's not really serving me. I get it and I understand it. I know where those feelings are. It's just like, I really have a bigger commitment, and here's really what I want to do with it. And so I think it's given me a lot of power to definitely delve into this conversation, to continue. This is one other thing I wanted to say is, like some people keep asking, why is it that you guys keep dwelling on that event that happened like 6.5 years ago? I mean, aren't y'all done with it? And I'm like, yeah, actually, like the healing continues to, just to blossom another layer, right, of my healing. And I think going to this premiere is definitely part of my healing. It's not like something I can ever get rid of or say, "Ooh, I wasn't there." Like, it happened to me, and I have a choice in it. I can either be in shame or silence or secrecy about it, or I can not and have it run me and where I'm, what I'm doing right now, or I can actually hit it face on, or I don't know if that's really pretty aggressive, but like just embrace that it is part of my path and my journey, and be more conscious and aware that that's what's going on, and choose to take the higher road in all of it. Like, how does this serve my bigger purpose in life? So like, that's really what I see about the shame and the judgments. And of course there's a billion more judgments, but we don't have to go into all of those.
Can I jump in with something you're making me think of?
Yes.
So something that was coming to mind was that, it's important too to look at the difference between feeling guilty and feeling shame, or feeling guilt and feeling shame. And guilt, as it's defined, is guilt is when somebody, when they feel guilty, they think, I did something bad. And it's corrective. You can correct your behavior, and children, it's a bit of a tool and with kids and even a little bit with ourselves. We self-monitor our behavior. Are we behaving consistent with our values? And if we don't, it's a icky feeling. And usually that's a feeling of guilt, when you know that if you did or said something, you probably shouldn't have, because it's not consistent with who you really are or who you want to be. But shame doesn't say, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy place to be. And sometimes, and this happened even in the events that we went to with the coaching style that was there, where it's very popular to say, oh, your world is a reflection of you. And so when bad things happen, and if you're not resilient to shame, then when bad things happen, you think that it's because you are bad. I must have done something. Or it becomes a bit of it's karma. Or I won't even start throwing around all those terms. We should probably do a whole other blab on karma and dharma and all of that stuff. I'm sure I could learn a lot from Julie. But, but it's really potentially quite harmful if every time something goes sideways or wrong, somebody's heaping it on themselves to say, this is happening. My world is a reflection of me. It must mean I am bad, or I did something wrong. And that was something that I had to really work through with all of this, because I did feel responsible I certainly was responsible for being there, putting myself in that situation, or accountable. But you walk away from or crawl away from something like that thinking, how did I, was I complacent? Was I complicit? Yeah. They're all healthy questions to ask, but they became overwhelming for me. And it was very, very dark. And if anything can come out of talking about it, and especially after all this time, because it's only with this amount of time that, that I've been able to develop the perspective that I have this conversation 2 years ago, it wouldn't be this. it would still be coming from a much lower and sadder place.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to get into that because that's something that I've refined as far as this whole mirroring aspect of the world and your unconscious mind. And we've done a lot of work in that area, but it's not just, we're always adapting to our environment. It's not, so our environment comes around and it starts to create us, but we can also create our environment. And that was a massive co-creation of a whole lot of people.
Yes. Yes.
Right? For any single person who was there, especially as a participant, to take it on as this was somehow my fault. I mean, we're probably 3 for 3 here, right?
Yeah.
Right? So, and it's probably 53 for 53 as far as not everyone who was there. Taking it on and then, and then not allowing, joy, happiness, success, and positive things to come to us. And then when I said earlier about, your results are a reflection of you, I think that's the crux of it, and that's where a lot of my focus and energy is now in understanding that and being able to communicate it to people and hopefully help as a result.
Something that you had said, Brandy and Laura, to continue what you're saying, Spiritual Warrior, it was a life-changing event. People died at that event. It changed our lives. I think we do ourselves a disservice if we pretend otherwise. I don't know how to walk away from that and be the same person I was before I got there. And it was not anything that we would have consciously chosen to participate in had we known the whole scope of the event. However, we're on this side of it, this side of things. And I'm so happy to hear you both saying how we wouldn't have necessarily picked it again. However, on this side, we like who we are. We are proud of the work that we've done. We claim the fact that, we allowed ourselves to be wounded human beings, and we didn't let that destroy us, where we let ourselves heal and we picked ourselves back up again. And here we are, ready and willing to face the world with it. And if anything, I went to Spiritual Warrior to find women like you, both of you. I wanted to find peers. I wanted to find companions for this lifetime. And I wanted to find women who would be willing to do what I was willing to do in life. And I don't know how else you find them other than the people who walk with you through the fire, literally through the fire. And and so I choose to claim the fact that I was there. And I am proud to say that I was there with you, both of you. So I would suggest, Brandy, maybe reframing how you look at Spiritual Warrior in your life, because I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to call you my friend. And you have definitely changed since Spiritual Warrior. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I love the changes I see in you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if I may have implied that I didn't think that I got value from.
No, it wasn't that. It was just more in comment to other people and how they may perceive Spiritual Warrior and how you confronting that.
Yeah, I wrote down here, like in our notes and stuff, and I kind of wanted to share this because I know that there probably are others out there that participated with us that feel, I know that we're everywhere, right, on the spectrum of healing, right? Because any traumatic experience that people go through, we are where we are. And it depends on how willing we are to look at certain things. And there's always the next level of, how do you get through this? How do you get past it? How do you grow past it? And when initially, whenever I had gone, I guess it was about a year later, I went to a women's conference where there's like, I don't know, there's like 1,100 women from all over the world coming to this women's conference. And it was kind of my first outing, like back into the business world and putting myself out there. I thought it was going to be a fairly safe environment for me to, talk about my business and, really grow and expand that way, business-wise. And as I'm there, there's an event that evening, which everybody goes to because that's kind of what was in the lineup. And it happened to be a play that they were doing a reading for. So they had people up on the stage that were reading this play. They weren't acting it out, but they were reading it because it was very new, fresh off the press. And as I'm sitting there, it's the story about me and all of us that participated in the Sweat Lodge. And it was from the perspective of a woman that didn't know any of us, that wasn't there, and she just was really capitalizing off of the media exposure, I guess, or that this was something big that happened in the media. And all she had to go by to create it, because this was right after all of the media, this was in 2010. The only thing that she had to go by in order to create her play was the media and their take on what happened. And so I'm just sitting there thinking I'm in this safe environment to finally step out in the business world and do this again after being seriously traumatized from the event. And I'm listening to someone on stage talk about the experience that I was in, having never been there. And it was just part of it. So what happened was the 2020 thing had come out, which was definitely not my voice and what I had intended to share with the world. And now I'm having this experience of these other people telling my story. And again, and it was horrible. So going into doing this film with CNN Films, 5-6 years later, was really a big deal for me and a big step to come out. And there was a lot of judgment still. Oh, so much judgment. Like, what am I thinking? Why would we do this? And I know that both of you guys and I had conversation, as well as a couple of the others that participated. It's just like, why are we doing this? And like having to be super crystal clear about the why and what was possible. And Laura, you spoke to that. Like, what is possible out of this? Why we would be willing to put ourselves through this again. But so I'm really excited about the upcoming premiere on Friday evening. It screens 9:30 p.m. in New York at Tribeca Film Festival. And I'm really excited to see that. And I'm so grateful that both of you are going to be there with me so that we can do this together too. Because I feel like that this whole healing journey for all of us, and even those that, we're not necessarily in contact right now, I know that the healing process has been much better together.